My name is Nova Hart, 32 years old. If you met me at work, you'd probably say I look like someone who had her life figured out. Software developer, decent apartment in the city, reliable car, savings account that grows instead of shrinks. From the outside, I seem steady. But what most people don't see is that every achievement of mine has felt like a dinner bell to my family. A signal that I could handle not just my own life, but theirs too. It started innocently years back. A small ask here and there. Honey, the electric bill is a little high this month. Can you help? Or Dad's prescription went up. Just until next paycheck. I said yes because that's what you do for family, right? But the just until next time never ended. Over the years, emergencies multiplied like weeds. Groceries, car repairs, soccer cleats, a programming class for my nephew. Always urgent, always framed as life or death, and always my problem to fix. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the silence when I needed help. The day I moved into my apartment, I asked my sister Lisa if her husband Mark could lend a hand. Just help carry boxes for a couple of hours. Mark had said yes at first, but 2 days before, Lisa called. We talked about it, and you need to handle your own problems. You can hire movers. The casual dismissal stung worse than the $400 bill I ended up paying strangers. Still, I kept showing up, because that's what I'd been trained to do. Patch every hole, catch every fall, absorb every cost. Competence became my leash. That leash tightened the night of the pot roast dinner. I drove up to my parents' house, a modest suburban place that creaked in familiar ways. From the outside, it looked unchanged, but I noticed small things as I walked in. A hairline crack above the living room window, a family photo tilted slightly askew on the wall, as if the house itself had shifted. It was almost poetic, though I didn't realize then how much that metaphor would matter. Inside, the table was already full. Lisa, arms folded in that self-satisfied way of hers. Mark, nodding along to whatever Dad was saying. Their 2 kids, Jake and Emma, chatting about school. Mom bustling in and out with her pot roast, her smile stretched too wide, too rehearsed. We ate, and for the first 20 minutes, it was all about Lisa, her job, her kids' activities, Mark's plans for the holidays. I might as well have been invisible, chewing quietly while conversation swirled around me. Then Dad coughed, just a light cough, but Mom froze mid-bite. She put her fork down, turned toward me with this bright, artificial smile, and I felt the shift in the room. The silence thickened. Nova, honey, she began sweetly, we've all been talking. Your father and I decided that we really need to buy a country house, somewhere outside the city where we can enjoy our retirement. Fresh air, room for the kids to play, a place we can all share. For a second, I thought I misheard. What? A country house? Lisa was nodding vigorously, Mark smiling like it was Christmas morning. Even the kids seemed in on it, eyes bright, waiting for me to clap with excitement. I stared at them. Mom, you can't be serious. Don't you remember the foundation issue here? The specialist said it was urgent. You can't just ignore that. She waved her hand like I'd mentioned a fly buzzing near her ear. Oh, nonsense. That crack isn't going anywhere. This house will last another decade. What matters is quality of life now. We found a perfect place, only $235,000. Practically a steal. My pulse thudded. You're telling me you want me to buy it? With what, exactly? You're the only one who can afford it, Dad said flatly. No hesitation, no apology, just expectation. I swallowed, the weight of their gazes pressing down like a stone. I have my own mortgage. I'm not taking on another one for a house I'll never live in. Oh. The payments would only be about $1,500, Mom pressed, leaning forward. On top of the $2,000 I already pay every month, I shot back. You're asking me to carry 2 households while you pretend the one you already own isn't collapsing. The room chilled instantly. Lisa's eyes narrowed, her lips twitching in something close to triumph. Dad leaned back, disappointment etched into his features like I'd failed a test I never agreed to take. Well, Mom said coolly, I suppose we know where we stand now. Very disappointing, Nova, Dad added, shaking his head. I looked around the table. Every face was aligned against me. Not one person said, she's right about the foundation. Not one person asked what this would do to me. The air was heavy, suffocating. I pushed my chair back. I think I should go, I said quietly. I think you should too, Mom replied, voice like ice. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, but before I could reach the door, Lisa followed me into the kitchen. She waited until we were out of sight of the others and whispered, You really blew it tonight. I turned, anger sparking. "Excuse me?" "Mom and Dad needed this," she hissed. "You could have helped. Instead, you made them feel small. Don't act surprised when they cut you out." I studied her face. For a second, I saw the little girl she once was, desperate for approval. Then I realized she wasn't warning me. She was relishing it. "Maybe they should cut me out," I whispered back. "I'm done being the family wallet." Her smirk deepened. "We'll see." I walked out without another word. No one followed me. No one said goodbye. The drive home was a blur of headlights and quiet fury. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I kept replaying the moment their faces all turned expectantly toward me, as if my life, my savings, my stability existed solely to fund their dreams. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the crack in my bedroom ceiling. Tiny, barely visible, but there. A reminder that everything, even concrete and blood ties, fractures under too much weight. I didn't know then how far those cracks would spread, or that the real collapse was only beginning. I told myself I was done after the pot roast ambush, but December has a way of seducing you with old rituals. By the second week, the city smelled like cinnamon and wet pavement, and department store speakers piped the same 4 carols into every aisle. I found myself picking up gifts almost on autopilot. Dad's new tablet because his old one coughed itself awake each morning. A cashmere sweater for Mom in that soft winter rose color she loves. The perfume Lisa had circled in a glossy magazine. A sturdy watch for Mark. A gaming headset for Jake. A little lacquered jewelry box for Emma. I kept the receipts like talismans in my wallet, telling myself this was a peace offering, a way to keep a bridge from burning all the way down. A week before Christmas, I called Mom. Her voice was neutral, carefully sanded down. Yes, Christmas was at their house. Yes, I was invited. "Your family," she said, with no warmth, as if speaking a line written on a cue card. I should have recognized the tone, how rehearsed it was, how uncurious. But hope doesn't traffic in logic. Hope is a muscle memory. On Christmas Eve, I pulled into my parents' driveway with the trunk full of wrapped boxes. The house lights glowed through the thin curtains. Lisa's SUV was already there. When I walked in, the familiar smells hit me. Ham glazed to a sheen, sweet potatoes, something buttery cooling on the counter. The tree was up, its needles already drying at the tips. The old angel at the top listed slightly to one side, like a tired ballerina who never got to retire. We ate a pleasant dinner, pleasant in the way truce is pleasant. Dad asked about my job and nodded gravely at my answers. Mark told a story about a coworker who microwaved fish in the office kitchen. Lisa narrated Emma's school play in excruciating detail. Mom laughed in the right places, but she watched me with a delicate alertness, as if waiting to see which way I'd jump. No one mentioned the country house. The omission felt intentional and heavy, like a photograph turned face down. When Mom offered my old room for the night, I said yes. It was easier than pretending I wanted to drive back to the city and spend midnight alone. Upstairs, my childhood room was a time capsule with a new paint color. The bedspread was different, but the dent in the carpet where my desk used to be remained, an absence pressed into the floorboards. I lay awake longer than I meant to, with the hum of the house buzzing through the vent. Somewhere downstairs, the heater clicked on and off, and once I thought I heard the faintest tremor through the wall, like something settling too quickly. The foundation. I imagined rebar and concrete deep in the earth, hairline fractures slowly spidering outward. The metaphor was becoming literal, whether I wanted it to or not. Morning came bright and cold. We padded downstairs in pajamas the way we used to when Lisa and I were little, and the world felt like a promise you could unwrap. The tree was ringed with gifts. Mine were the prettiest. Clean lines, satin ribbons, tags in my careful handwriting. But I told myself that didn't matter. We sank onto the rug, kids first, then Lisa and Mark, then my parents. Paper tore, plastic popped, thank yous ricocheted around the room. I watched their faces open in delight, Dad's eyebrows lifting at the tablet, Mom's fingers resting on the cashmere as if it were a sleeping bird, Lisa pressing the perfume bottle to her wrist with a sigh, Mark sliding the watch strap through its loop, Jake crowing at the headset, Emma whispering, "It's just like the one I wanted," eyes shiny. It took me a moment to notice what was wrong. The floor around the tree was a battlefield of paper and ribbon, but my name wasn't on anything left. I peered behind the trunk, behind a stack of boxes, inside a gift bag propped against the couch. Nothing. Where's my Christmas present? I asked, lighter than I felt. Silence fell as neatly as snow. Their faces shifted, not with surprise, but with a satisfaction they didn't bother to hide. Mom's mouth curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Santa doesn't give presents to ungrateful children, she said, voice sweet and lethal. It landed like a slap. I stared at her. What? Lisa's laugh came too quickly, like a cue she'd been waiting for. You brought this on yourself, Nova. Actions have consequences. Dad cleared his throat the way he does before pronouncing a verdict. We raised you, Nova. We gave you everything. When we asked for help, you turned your back. Lessons need to be learned. The room distorted slightly, as if I were underwater. Around my feet, scraps of the paper I bought clung to my slippers. I could list every bill I'd paid over the last 6 years, every emergency I'd quietly absorbed, every weekend I'd given up to fix what they refused to plan for. I could spool out a ledger so long it would wrap the tree twice. But the ledger wouldn't matter. They weren't measuring in facts, only in obedience. Okay, I said, because it was either that or cry, and crying would be an offering. I stood, and the tree lights flickered as I passed, as if unsure whether to keep shining. Upstairs, I packed quickly. Toothbrush, pajamas, the paperbacks I'd brought to read, my phone charger still warm at the outlet. When I came back down, my family remained on the rug, half watching me, half pretending to care about the gifts in their laps. No one stood. No one followed me to the door. Mom said nothing. Dad's mouth was a straight line. Lisa's eyes glittered with a triumph that made me finally, fully nauseous. On the front step, the air knifed clean and bright. I put the bags in my trunk and slid into the driver's seat. My hands shook for a moment on the steering wheel, then steadied. I didn't look back. At home, the quiet was not absence. It was oxygen. I made tea and stood by the window with the mug warm between my palms. I replayed each line they'd spoken, and then I shut the reel off like a lamp. That afternoon, I opened my bank app and did something radical. Nothing for anyone but me. No transfers to the family emergency pot that had somehow become permanent. No quiet USPS money orders to cover just this month. I set up an extra $1,000 toward my mortgage principal beginning January. I tripled my automatic transfer to savings. I created a small joy fund, a line item I'd always judged as indulgent, now renamed survival. Within weeks, I felt the difference. My paychecks pooled instead of evaporating. I booked a detail for my car and watched it emerge from the garage, clean and bright, like a creature I'd rescued. I bought a new couch that didn't swallow me whole. I researched Hawaii and clicked book on a flight in April, and it felt like a quiet rebellion against something ugly. My phone stayed silent. No. Hey, honey, can you spot us for Dad's refill? No. Emergency, Nova. The dryer died. I waited for the anxiety to arrive, the guilt to lay eggs along my spine. It didn't. There was a kind of phantom ache, the way you feel for a while after taking off a heavy backpack. But it was manageable, even pleasant. I ate dinner at my own table and tasted every bite. In late March, 3 months to the day since Christmas, my phone rang. While I was debugging a stubborn issue at work, the number flashed Mom. For a second, I pictured letting it go to voicemail. Curiosity answered for me. Hello? Her voice came high and breathless. Oh, thank God, Nova. The house, the foundation. There's a huge crack. The inspector says it's unsafe. Your father, in the background. Dad shouted something I couldn't make out. I pushed back from my desk, the hum of the open office suddenly too loud. How much? 50,000, she said, sobbing around the number. We need 50,000 to replace the foundation, and we need it right now. The number landed with a dull inevitability. I pictured the tilted angel, the hairline fissure above the window, the tremor in the night wall. I pictured Christmas morning and the paper clinging to my slippers. Mom, I said softly, why are you calling me about this? Because you have savings, she snapped before softening it. You're our daughter. Family helps each other. The laugh rose in my throat and turned into something steadier. Remember Christmas? You told me Santa doesn't give presents to ungrateful children. Maybe ask Santa. Silence pulsed through the line. Then, don't you dare talk to me like that. I am your mother. You are, I said, and you showed me exactly where I fall on your list. No. I hung up before the second volley fired. My hands trembled a little, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, like cresting a hill you've climbed 1,000 times and finally seeing the view. The phone rang again. I declined. Again. Declined. 6 more times. Declined. That night, a text appeared from Lisa. You made Mom cry. House is about to collapse. You happy? I typed, deleted, deleted. Finally, I'm sorry the house is failing. I warned you in October. Get a loan. Sell something. Solve it like adults. 3 dots pulsed. Vanished. Nothing. In bed, I stared up at my ceiling and thought about rebar and roots, what holds and what gives. Somewhere outside, a siren rasped and faded. I imagined my parents gathering their arguments like kindling. I knew what was coming next, not the last call, but the cavalry, the flying monkeys, scripture and shame, a parade of borrowed moral authority. I turned out the light and let the dark come on. My heart slowed. The foundation of my life, for once, felt like it belonged to me. The next morning at work, my phone lit up before I'd even finished my coffee. The screen showed Mom, and then Dad, and then Lisa, call after call. I let them all slide into voicemail, my earbuds in, while the cursor blinked on a stubborn block of code, but each buzz vibrated through my ribs like a low-grade earthquake. By lunch, there were 7 voicemails stacked like bricks. Against my better judgment, I listened. Mom's voice cracked and pleaded, Nova, please call us back. The inspector said the whole house could collapse. We can't sleep. We're terrified. Dad's message was harder, angrier. You're our daughter. You don't abandon family when we're in danger. You owe us that much. Lisa's was clipped, almost businesslike. Mom's blood pressure is through the roof. You have the money. You need to step up. I sat with my sandwich untouched, staring at the cubicle wall. Oh, step up. It was as if they were all reading from the same script, each role assigned, each emotion calculated. They wanted panic to bend me, guilt to trap me. That evening, when I reached my apartment building, I stopped short. 3 familiar figures stood outside my door, Mom, Dad, and Lisa. They looked smaller than I remembered, huddled in the fluorescent hallway light, but their eyes were sharp and expectant. Nova, Mom breathed when she saw me, her hands clasped dramatically at her chest. We need to talk. I could have turned around, but there was nowhere to go. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, leaving it open. They filed in, glancing around like tourists inspecting a museum, eyes flicking over my new couch, the framed art I'd bought myself, the absence of clutter. I could feel the silent inventory. What had I spent money on while they suffered? What do you want? I asked, dropping my bag by the door. All 3 spoke at once. Mom sobbed about the crack, splitting wider each day. Dad thundered about duty and gratitude. Lisa rattled off numbers about loan rates, the impossibility of timing, the urgency. Their words overlapped until it was just noise, a desperate chorus. Stop! My voice cut sharper than I meant. One at a time. They quieted. Mom stepped forward, tears glistening on her cheeks. Nova, honey, we're desperate. The inspector said if we don't fix it soon, the whole house could collapse. We could die in our sleep. I held her gaze. Then fix it. With what money? Dad barked. We're on a fixed income. We can't get a loan. You're the one with a good job. You're the one who can make this right. I almost laughed. Make it right? I've been making it right for years. Thousands of dollars, countless emergencies, every time you decided planning was optional. And when I finally said no, when I protected myself, what did you do? You humiliated me on Christmas morning. You made sure I was the only one without a gift. Lisa shifted uncomfortably but kept her chin up. We were hurt. You were cruel. Cruel? My voice rose. I bought you gifts worth thousands of dollars while you laughed at me like I was a naughty child. You called me ungrateful, and now you want $50,000 more? The silence that followed was dense, like wet wool. Dad's jaw worked, grinding something unsaid. Mom sniffled and looked down at her hands. Finally, Dad said, We raised you. We clothed you. We put you through college. You owe us. The words landed like a verdict, but I refused to let them pierce. I already paid you back. 6 years of bills, medications, repairs. I paid you back 100 times over. What I owe you now is nothing. Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I'd struck her. How can you say that? We're your parents. And I'm your daughter, I snapped. But you've made it clear I'm only valuable when I'm your ATM. The rest of the time, I'm expendable. Lisa's eyes hardened. You're single. You don't have kids. You don't need the money like we do. Ah, there it was. The unspoken truth finally spoken. My independence wasn't freedom to them. It was a resource to be mined. You're right, I said, steady. I don't have kids, which means I'm the only one who'll take care of me when I'm old. That's what my money is for. My future, not your bad planning. Dad's face reddened, his voice climbing. After everything we've done for you. When's the last time you asked how I was? I cut him off. When's the last time you cared about me, beyond what I could hand you in cash? Go on, tell me. No one answered. The silence stretched long and brittle. I want you to leave, I said finally. Mom blinked rapidly. Not until you agree. Then you'll be here a long time. We stared each other down. At last, Dad shoved his hands into his coat pockets. Lisa sighed through her nose, her mouth twisted. Mom dabbed at her cheeks, whispering something about betrayal under her breath. At the door, Mom turned back. Her eyes were sharp despite the tears. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, and shut the door behind them. Inside, the silence rang. My chest throbbed with adrenaline, hands trembling against the doorknob. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and exhaled. For the first time, I hadn't folded. I hadn't been pulled back into the cycle. But deep down, I knew my parents. I knew my sister. They didn't give up when there was money on the line. This wasn't the end. It was just the opening skirmish. They'd gather reinforcements, cloak their demands and borrowed authority, find new ways to press on my softest spots. And I wasn't wrong. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a new name. Aunt Carol, then Cousin Mike, then Uncle Robert, then Aunt Margaret, the one with her Bible always at the ready. Each message layered on top of the last, a chorus growing louder. The flying monkeys had arrived. It began with Aunt Carol. Her voice was syrupy sweet on the phone, but there was steel underneath. Nova, your mother told me what's happening. They could lose their home. You know how fragile your father's health is. How can you just stand by? I pinched the bridge of my nose. Aunt Carol, I've stood by for years. I've carried them through every so-called emergency. This isn't about love anymore. It's about money, and I can't keep being the solution. Her tone sharpened. Family is family. If you don't help them, what does that make you? I wanted to answer, finally free. Instead, I said, it makes me someone who refuses to be used. And I hung up. 2 hours later, Cousin Mike called. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Come on, Nova. 50 grand is nothing to you. You make more in a year than most of us will see in 3. Don't be stingy. Stingy, I laughed bitterly. Mike, you've never once asked me how I'm doing, but now you're a financial expert on my salary? Look, I'm just saying, if my parents needed me, I'd step up. Good, I said flatly. Then you can set the example. Write the check yourself. His sputter was almost satisfying before I ended the call. The following day, Uncle Robert went further. He showed up at my office building, waiting in the lobby with his hands shoved deep in his jacket. He tried for calm authority, but his eyes betrayed anger. Nova, this is shameful. Your parents gave you life, and you're letting them face ruin. What will people think when they hear you turned your back? I tilted my head. What people? The same relatives who've never lifted a finger for me? The same ones who only remember my number when my parents complain. If you're so horrified, you can take out the loan. His jaw tightened, and he muttered something about selfishness as he stalked out. By the weekend, it was Aunt Margaret's turn. She arrived at my apartment uninvited, clutching her Bible like a weapon. Without waiting, she opened to Exodus and began to read aloud, "Honor thy father and mother." I held the doorframe and let her finish, her voice rising with every verse. When she looked up triumphant, I said softly, if honoring parents means destroying myself to keep their illusions alive, then maybe they need to learn new scripture. If you're so concerned, Aunt Margaret, why don't you give them the 50,000? Her mouth opened and closed. She gathered her coat and left without another word. Still, their voices echoed in my apartment at night. The words tangled in my chest. Selfish, ungrateful, dishonorable. I'd been raised on those terms, marinated in them. Even as an adult, they reached for me like invisible hands. One night, I almost called back. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Mom's name. In the silence, I heard again the laughter under the tree, the phrase like a curse. Santa doesn't give presents to ungrateful children. I saw Lisa's smirk, Dad's nod of approval. The memory burned hotter than guilt ever could. I set the phone down, screen dark. The pressure campaign didn't stop at relatives. At work, a colleague pulled me aside after lunch. Hey, your uncle came by. He asked if you'd lost your humanity. He made a scene. Heat crawled up my neck. They weren't just coming after me in private. They were trying to make me a public villain. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my new couch, staring at the faint glow of the city through the blinds. For once, the silence felt like armor. No buzzing phone, no emergency, just me and the choices I'd made. I started to notice something. Each person who confronted me carried the same lines, the same rehearsed outrage. It was coordinated. Mom and Lisa had spread the story, framing me as the cold, wealthy daughter who refused to save her family. They didn't mention the years of bills I'd paid, the Christmas humiliation, the ambush in my apartment. No, in their version, I was a miser with ice in my veins. And yet, beneath the fury, I detected cracks. Carol's desperation, Mike's envy, Robert's frustration at being asked to do more than judge, Margaret's silence when her own finances came into play. They weren't protecting my parents, they were protecting the story that kept everyone comfortable, that the eldest daughter was reliable, generous, uncomplaining. My refusal threatened more than one household. One evening, as I sorted laundry, my phone buzzed again. A text from Lisa. Do you even care if Mom and Dad end up homeless? What will you say at their funeral? That you chose your mortgage over their lives? I stared at the words until they blurred, then I typed back, they chose their pride over treating me like family. I warned them about the foundation months ago. Don't blame me for cracks you ignored. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, nothing more. Each night, I checked my bank app before bed. The numbers rose quietly, steadily. My mortgage balance shrank faster than I dared hope. I had money for retirement, money for travel, money for emergencies of my own. For the first time, my life was built on solid ground. My ground, not theirs. Still, doubt prowled at the edges. What if the house really collapsed? What if they ended up on the street? Could I live with that? Then I remembered the look on their faces Christmas morning, the way every eye slid away as I searched for my name under the tree. How quickly they'd chosen cruelty when I withheld obedience. If the house collapsed, it wouldn't be my fault. It would be the inevitable consequence of cracks ignored, warnings dismissed, years of shortcuts. A metaphor turned into concrete truth. I didn't know yet what sacrifices they would make, or how far their bitterness would reach. I only knew this. For the first time in my life, I was not the safety net. I was not the fix. And if that meant I had to be the villain in their story, I would wear the title like armor. Because I had finally learned something they never wanted me to understand. Sometimes, the only way to keep standing is to let someone else fall. It was nearly a month before the noise stopped. No more phone calls flooding my screen, no more relatives ambushing me with scripture or speeches. The silence felt almost eerie, like the pause after a storm when you're not sure if another wave is coming. Then one Saturday, in the grocery store checkout line, I ran into Mrs. Peterson, my parents' longtime neighbor. She was a small woman with quick eyes and a way of noticing things no one else did. "Oh, Nova," she said warmly, though there was an edge of curiosity in her tone. "I heard about your parents' troubles." I braced myself. "What about them?" She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "They sold their car. And that old boat of your father's? Finally gone. Got about $25,000 for everything. Then they took out a bank loan for the other 25. The foundation is all fixed now." I blinked, the image forming in my mind. Dad standing sour-faced by the curb as strangers drove off in his prized boat, Mom wringing her hands as the car keys changed hands. They'd acted like helpless children, but when push came to shove, they'd solved it themselves. Mrs. Peterson smiled faintly. "But they're bitter, Nova, bitter as can be. They keep telling everyone you abandoned them when they needed you most." I nodded slowly. Good for them, for handling it, even if they hate me for it. Her expression softened, but there was judgment there too, unspoken. I didn't bother defending myself. I simply paid for my groceries and walked out. That night, I drove past my parents' street. I hadn't meant to. I told myself it was just on the way home, but my car turned as if pulled by muscle memory. The house looked sturdier than before. Fresh concrete around the base gleamed faintly under the streetlight. The windows were lit, shadows moving inside. Life went on. But something in me shifted as I watched. The house was standing because they had finally sacrificed something of their own. They'd proved what I had always known. They could find solutions, but it was easier to demand mine. For years, I had been the patch over their cracks. And the moment I stopped, they were forced to face the real damage. The house stood, yes, but the family foundation? That was another matter. Weeks later, Lisa sent me a message. No apology, no olive branch, just a sharp-edged text. You think you won, but Mom and Dad will never forgive you. Hope your money keeps you warm when you're alone. I stared at it for a long time. Then, instead of replying, I deleted it. Because here's what she didn't understand. I had already chosen warmth. Not the fleeting warmth of approval or conditional love, but the steady warmth of self-respect, of nights without panic, of mornings without dread. Sometimes I imagine the conversation I'll never have with my parents. In my mind, it goes like this. You taught me that family means sacrifice, but you only ever meant my sacrifice. When I finally refused, you decided I was ungrateful, cruel, selfish. But what you called selfishness was just survival. What you called betrayal was simply me refusing to drown to keep you afloat. And then I picture their faces, unmoved, already reaching for the next line of defense. And I let the imagined conversation dissolve because some truths don't need an audience. One evening, sitting by my window with a book, I noticed the small plant I'd bought weeks earlier, a fiddle-leaf fig in a clay pot, its leaves glossy and strong. When I first brought it home, it was fragile, uncertain in the new soil. But with steady care, it had taken root. Its stem was firmer now, the leaves broadening toward the light. It struck me as simple but profound. Foundations can be rebuilt, not the ones others abandon you to patch, but the ones you claim for yourself. My parents' house might stand on new concrete, but mine, my life, stood on boundaries that no storm could crack again. Do I regret it? Sometimes. Do I miss them? Of course. Family ties don't vanish. They fray, they ache, they haunt. But regret doesn't mean I was wrong. Missing them doesn't mean I owe them. They'll tell the story their way, that I abandoned them, that money mattered more to me than blood. Let them. I know the truth. I stopped being their solution, and they hated me for it. But in the silence that followed, I found something I never had before. Peace. And maybe, just maybe, that peace is the greatest gift I'll ever give myself.